Hi, this is Evan here, Dinarius, from the Latinum Institute. And in this short video, I want to talk to you briefly about novels written in Latin. Now, Latin novels, very little nowadays is known about novels written in Latin, but some of the earliest novels written in the modern period were composed in Latin for an international audience, not just an audience in England or France or Germany, but for audiences across Europe. Because if you were someone writing in England at that time, you had a small readership in England in the 1600s. If you wanted to reach out beyond that, then you needed to write in a language that intellectuals and readers in other countries in Europe could access, and at that time it was Latin. Indeed, the history of the modern novel and the development of the novel and novella as a form that came down from ancient Roman writers and then wasn't used for many centuries comes about from a deliberate attempt to reinvent the kind of world that the ancient Romans inhabited. This reinvention, of course, included things like the development of opera and certain types of poetry as well, written in an attempt to imitate the forms that were used during the time of the Greeks and the ancient Romans. A large number of these early novels exist. They're around, they're accessible, and can be found now on Google Books, archive.org, europeana.eu, but the authors and the works themselves are forgotten because the readership has disappeared. The number of people who can read Latin for pleasure is very small, whereas in the 1600s and 1700s it was sizable. For example, the most celebrated author in England in his generation, in fact for the entire 17th century, was John Berkeley, but we don't remember his name at all anymore. He had a runaway bestseller that was top of the best-selling lists. If they existed in the form we have them now, he would have topped the lists for the entire 17th century. And that was his book Argenis, which came out in many versions, some even illustrated, very costly editions. This book, the Argenis, was, one could arguably say, the first well-constructed, properly formed novel written since the fall of ancient Rome. And it just goes to show that a book can be extremely popular for a very long period of time and then subsequently become completely forgotten. Everyone has forgotten John Berkeley except for a very, very small group, a small coterie of neo-Latinists and Latin students and historians who may know the book exists, but the number who've actually read it is even smaller. The Argenis is now available in a Latin-English version with a facing English translation, and it was translated after the 1700s into other European languages. Another example of a Latin novel is Mundus Alter et Idem by Joseph Hall in 1605, Rei Publicae Christianopolitanae Descriptio by Johannes Andreae, 1619, Civitatis Solis by Campanella, 1623, Utopia by Jacobus Biedermann, 1640, and Skydromedia by Antonius Legrand in 1699, and one of the first science fiction works ever written was written in Latin by Nicholas Klimt, and it was Iter Subterraneum, a journey underground. So Jules Verne may have written The Journey to the Center of the Earth, but he was prefigured by this work, Iter Subterraneum, of Nicholas Klimt. And Noah Solema by Samuel Gott This novel, interestingly enough, was once thought to have been written by the English poet Milton. And if you look on Google Books, you will find that Milton, in some of the cases, is catalogued as the author of this particular novel. And so on. There are a large number. I haven't listed them all. But if you are somebody who's interested in developing your Latin language skills, then you need to read a lot of material. And these Renaissance works are more accessible to a modern reader. They're closer to us historically in mindset, etc. And so they're easier for us to read, even though they do look back, of course, to classical Rome and ancient Greece for their inspiration. These texts are more accessible. And if you want to become a skilled Latinist, then you need to read and read and read and read as much as you can. Study Latin, grammar by all means, but most of your language learning will come from exposure to the language itself in the form of words on the page, of course, and to some degree from Latin that you will have heard, and for some of us, from Latin that we experience in conversation with other people. So that's Latin novels, and you can do research yourself on Google, on Bing, etc., and search around. Not all of these novels have even been catalogued. Some of them have been completely forgotten, and you may stumble across a work that no one has seen since the 1600s. This does happen. The catalogues of Neo-Latin literature, the works written in Latin in this time period of the Latin revival, are incomplete. Scholars are working on them, but we don't have complete lists of the Neo-Latin literature of Ireland, of England, of Denmark, of Sweden, Germany, Italy, etc. In all of these countries, people were writing in Latin, all kinds of materials, not just scientific works, as people suppose, but works of high literature and art. So that's it from this little installment from the Latinum Institute. If you're interested in learning Latin, there's a complete set of Latin courses and resources at latinum.org.uk, and everything you need there to learn Latin from beginner level through to highly advanced university level is available, and the materials are hosted at Patreon, and you can subscribe if you wish, or support the project at Platinum at Patreon. Vale, bye.